Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do the Tribulation series questions. This one is more about the two temples. Now, I know that's maybe not as thrilling, but guess what? You are going to find out things that you didn't know about your faith. Coming right up. So there's a friend of mine who actually was bugging me about this particular topic one time, and he was like, "You need to research the temple and what it means." You know, in eschatology, which is the teaching of end time issues, that is really foundational because if you don't understand why Jesus came in the first place, the first four spring to early summer feasts that he accomplishes in his first coming, you don't get the last or the second coming. And you're going to struggle with very certain portions of Scripture and why Jesus does what he does, why Paul talks the way that he does in Romans. There are patterns inside of there, but it's also, I want to show you based upon eschatology points here too. And I'm sorry, by the way, in the past we've had some problems with my microphones and they've gone kind of crazy if you listen to my other broadcasts, but we're trying to get those fixed. There's just lots of little things that, like StreamYard will change every time I turn around with that too. Okay, so just a picture of it. So the temple, the Tribulation Temple versus the Millennial Reign Temple. Now, the Tribulation Temple is going to be very similar to every other temple in the past. There are three other temples in the past. There'll be the Tribulation Temple. The Millennial Reign Temple will be dramatically different. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so first off, the Tribulation Temple. It creates a place for the Antichrist. It's to thumb his nose, or basically, and it's really ugly what he does. But when the Antichrist becomes indwelled with Satan inside of him, this is Revelation 12:12, it's one of my favorite verses. For the devil has come down with great wrath, knowing that his time is short. And when you have that kind of level of, it actually starts with woe to you, earth. The devil has come down with great wrath, knowing that his time is short. And you go, wait a second, God doesn't do woes that many times. He really doesn't. In the tribulational world, he only says it three separate times. This is one of those woe points that he's giving. And it's related to the temple in the way that he's trying to do it. Because the Antichrist doesn't want to claim that he's God. He might try to do that. That's not really his process. He wants to be the king of the world. Okay? Satan, his job, sorry, my allergy season here. It's not my cough coming back, just allergy season. But Satan wants to be king of the universe. Now, if you read Ephesians 6:12, that the principalities are in the dark places are in the atmospheric realms all the way down to earth with that too. And so and when he does have to be kicked out of those principalities in Ephesians 6:12, then he's stuck on the earth. And that really ticks him off. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that thing. But again, when people say to me, and I had a guy do this the other day who said, I don't know, the guy, girl, I couldn't tell the avatar point, and said, well, we're in the tribulation. I'm like, one of the simplest things is you don't see a temple there. If you don't see a temple in Jerusalem, we're not in the tribulation. Simplest answer out there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of others, but that's really the simplest answer. That's what you actually can say to your friends if they're telling you that the temple is there or we're in the tribulation. Okay. It also allows the Jewish culture to begin to bring back more Jews in the world. The Antichrist has to set up a treaty with many nations, and it's going about the temple, because when you read Daniel 9:27, He sets it up for 1 week, and in the middle of the week, he causes abomination, which causes desolation, or he creates the abomination, which causes desolation. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we have talked about that before. And when you understand what he does and why he's going to do it, and I'll show you it in the pictures here, he's trying to set himself up and kick out God. But in the beginning time frame, this is a peaceful time frame specifically for Israel. Now, it's not peaceful for the rest of the world if you watch the series, but it's peaceful for Jerusalem in that way. And it's because, and Jews are going to flock back to Israel. Well, that's part of collecting the remnant. Now, the remnant is only the last third, but the 2/3 of the Jews of this time frame, whatever date in the future, however many Jews are going to be in that time frame, you're going to see 2/3 of them be killed off because Satan is so mad at them. That's what Revelation 12 talks a lot about with that too. It also shows the sacrifices are a real strong problem for the conversation of Messiah, because as the Messiah shows up more and more, or this conversation about this potential or anti-Messiah, Antichrist is anti-Messiah. It's the same kind of thing. Antichrist is just the Greek word. Messiah is the Jewish or the Hebraic word with that too in Aramaic. And so you're seeing that kind of thing when we have this person who's claiming to be the Messiah or the Christ, and you're going to see all that. I mean, well, hopefully you're not here to see it, but you see all that stuff happening, and then you got the temple. They're going to say, wait a second, this doesn't jibe in here. But it's also one of the powerful points too that I talk to people about. Are we in the end times? If you don't see a temple and you haven't seen it for at least 1 year of a cycle, we're not even toward the middle part of the tribulation. So we haven't even seen the temple built, and we haven't seen it even go through one cycle of the sacrifices. Excuse me. So like a yearly cycle of that. And so if you haven't seen any of those kind of things, again, we're not in there. Okay, the Bible has to be fulfilled. You don't want it to be fulfilled, and you're not talking about tribulation issues. You want to talk about things that the Muslims talk about, or any other religional point wants to say. Great, go for it. Okay, but if you want to talk about the tribulation, if you want to talk the millennial reign, these are the way that you understand it is from the textbook. I mean, I read a book called, just one of my 18 books, Revelations of the Red Pill. And if you're going to go, okay, he said, you're using my textbook or my booklet to explain a position, okay, that Scott's talking about. So if we're trying to we're having I actually had a Bible study group that got the book and then they went through the book. Okay, that's kind of cool. And so, they're, if they're going to say, well, did he say that? And I was like, well, he didn't say that, or he did say that. He said it on page 82 kind of thing. And that's the same thing I would say when you talk about the tribulation. This is one of the big keys for why we will be in the tribulation, but we're not there yet. Okay? When the Jews are kicked out of the temple, it shows whom they cannot trust, or who, I should probably say whom they should not trust, or they can't trust. It really gives a powerful understanding of the differentiation between the Christ that is to come for the Jewish perspective versus the dude that's calling himself Christ and wherever his Babylon area is, or wherever he lives before he has Babylon going. And I do think it's a real Babylon. So that's the basic purpose of that temple. And it's really the real part is it's going to be around for that 3.5 years. They're going to, and then it's going to be desolate. Now, to make something desolate is you got to pretty much wipe it out with that too. And I'll show you more about that. Okay. But the Millennial Reign Temple, it reminds the Jews and the world of the connection of the Old Testament. It's sin offering versus Jesus' planetary kingdom offering. So what you will see, you will be in a resurrected body, and you will see who I call the sheep. That's the sheep nations, and the other one are the remnant. And the remnant, the Jewish remnant that becomes belief in Christ. This is Revelation 6, who become belief in Christ at the very last second. Remember, the tribulation has a timeline point, but it's a little hard to do it because every time we jump into heaven, he's adjusting the viewpoint of timeline. Why? Because in heaven, time doesn't have a lot of meaning. Okay? Let me give you an example. My father-in-law, Frank, passed away a little over a week ago. Okay? So while we're dealing with his stuff, um, and his paperwork and everything. From Frank's perspective, for it's been 8 days for us. From Frank's perspective, he just barely walked in there, and he's like, "Dude, this is cool." No, it's a great thing because he wanted to be in heaven. It causes lots of issues for my wife and my son dealing with this too. Because I've been reconciling his death for a very long time with that. But the reality is, he's looking in heaven and he's like, cool. And from his idea is like, it's just like that. Now, when we talk, so let's go backwards. Sorry, I didn't mean to go too far off on that one. But the point is here, when you're in the millennial reign, those Jews are who are that remnant are going to be leading the planet, and they're also going to be leading people in worship um, of God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit. And that's going to be a part of it. So when they see the sin offerings, they can actually see Jesus, who will be king, and he'll be king in Jerusalem. So they're going to be able to see that kind of variant in there. Israel, again, is that center of the world. It's going to be centered directly on it. And the sheep and nations, which is basically, I call them sheep nations, they are going to have to come up on a yearly basis for Feast of Tabernacles. Now, Feast of Tabernacles is one of the last of the feasts, of the 7 feasts, that will be accomplished, but it doesn't become accomplished until the millennial reign. And the reason is the Feast of Tabernacles is that what they would go in, and it's a little bit later than October, it's around November-ish time frame. And so basically what happens in that particular time frame, after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And so what happens for that is that they would put tents up and they would worship together, but they would really more specifically is tell the stories of God. And it's part of a book series with Jeff Swanson and I that I wrote, and we co-wrote the thing, and it's called Foretold, and that is actually part of this kind of thing. So that's where we brought it from, and then bring the story back to the people with that. Now, there's also going to be a memorial of the body, the soul, and the spirit. And if you've ever seen really good memorials, one of the best one is the Holocaust Memorial that is in DC. And I remember I got to see it like in that first year. And I mean, and frankly, my family is my parents and my wife and my little son at the time. We were going to DC for something I can't tell you about, but something happened. Okay, good thing. And my older sister was there too. And so we go in there, and then you have to go up to the top level and go down. Right? It's kind of interesting the way they do that. And now I'm the World War II buff, so I'm getting lost in there. Not lost in a bad way. I'm stopping at every little thing, including like the train, cattle train, that one of the carts that they brought in. And so you walk through it. Now, some people are too emotional about that, so they could let you walk around it. But I mean, I'm stuck in there for probably 20, 30 minutes at least. They're all like waiting downstairs, and some of them got like something to eat because of the power and the presence of this, because they brought real things from the Holocaust. Well, guess what? That's a little bit of what will happen, but on a much grander scale, because the people who are going to grow up in the millennial reign, I'm not talking about the first people, the sheep nations and the remnant who are first believers, but those other people will not be believers. And so the temple is very important for them to connect with the past. And the memorial will be a really powerful reminder because Satan's not here. Again, that's part of my next one that we'll talk about a little bit more, but the next of the series. But that gives you some of the idea that's happening, and it's happening around the temple with that. And then you got to see how massive, or know how massive it is. It's maybe 10 to 15 miles. Um, and it's for that Feast of Tabernacles. It's because the whole nations, all of the nations, Zechariah, I want to say Zechariah 13. I think that is right. But those people are going to be there. So there's massive numbers of people that are all around in that way with that. Okay? So that just kind of gives you, it's a very different look to it, but it'll have many of the same basic features. Okay, so let's just kind of walk through this a little bit so you kind of see what I'm placing in here. Okay, so we start with the gate. So that's my brown one. Here's a gate here too that people would come in. So we got the gate, right? The outer court is where some of the people could go into, and I mean, there was an outer one outside of here. So just think of this little area over here as like the outer, areas that they really come into, because when they come in here, this is going to be the Jews. Now, it's the Jewish people that are in good standing that would come into the outer court. What they would do is bring their sin offering. Oops, sorry. Now, they would bring their sin offering in there, but they're not going to go into the Holy of Holies in that kind of pinkish, purplish area that you're seeing right there. But so they're going to be on the outer courts. The Holy of Holies, it actually is the quiet place in the presence, or his presence with that too. It's a powerful circumstance. You would actually die if you went in there and even touched anything if you weren't holy in that way, or if you hadn't, accomplished the sacrifices beforehand. So again, the outer court is where, the families would come in and they would bring their sin offering. Now, the first thing is that black area called the brazen altar. And then the brazen altar, its point is it would be a bloody mess. This is not like for the faint of heart. But again, even the kids would have understood what was going on here. Because you would bring, for instance, you might bring a sheep. Now, what they would do is have a perfect sheep. Didn't have any splotches on them, right? And they would bring that sheep, and this is like an indoor animal. It's like a pet. And the kids would have, go to bed with this thing and, cuddle with them and throw their balls around. The sheep would just be part of the inner circle of their family instead of being out in the outside, right? And so what happens is that after that first year, after the year that they spent with that animal, they would bring it for sacrifice. And it's such a powerful image when you understand it. And they're sacrificing on that brazen altar. Again, that's the death of Jesus and our death. So we're dying. I mean, when it says die to Christ daily, it means a violent nature of your flesh with that too. It's something I fight with all the time, right? Now, what they would do after they sacrificed that one, they would bring it over to the laver, and this is a bowl, and in that bowl there was water, and pure water, so that the priests would wash themselves off. And when they're looking and they're seeing the reflection of themselves, it's not just washing, but they're seeing the reflection of themselves. And see, they're going to see themselves in the dirty form, and they're washing themselves off in the clean nature. Oh, you guys gotta catch that. It is the perfect picture of washing yourself in the Word. So when you're in that dirty section of your life and you wash yourself off, you can see the difference before and after, kind of thing, right? So that's the piece that happens, but they would never see the rest of this portion here. So the priest would go in, and then they would bring up, and we'll just do it from the bottom up here. So the golden lampstands. So I had these, these little things. So there'd be 7 golden lampstands that would be sitting in there, and they would be the representations of Jesus as the light. Now this comes out in John 1. Jesus is the light of the world. Um, I had a vision of this one time. I mean, I remember reading my Bible every single day. And I had this pocket Bible. It was like I think it was the New Testament, and it had Psalms in there, if I remember right. And it was just a pocket one. And I just decided I was going to go through the whole thing. And then you don't understand, where I lived, where I grew up in south of Denver. Um, they picked me up early to drive, just for when later on I would drive to the high school. It's a 30-minute drive. And that was over dirt roads and, going 50 miles an hour, which we tended to do all the time. But if you're on the bus, and I'm the first one that gets picked up and the last one to get dropped off, the first one to get picked up, it's an hour and a half drive. So you had to get there just like super early, get up to the bus stop, right? And so and during that time frame, I had a very strong picture image when I got to John. And that picture image is, we see the light. And when you look at light, you see shadows around me because my chin has a shadow, or my glasses have a shadow below, and all those other things. But the vision that I really had was that there's no shadows. I mean, like, I saw underneath tables and there was no ability for shadows. Now, I didn't realize this. I mean, and I had no idea what I was seeing in the spirit realm. I mean, I thought I was making this thing up for literally half a dozen years. I'm 16, 17 years old, or 15, 16 years old. I had no idea until I realized later. I'm like, well, I was talking about, I was getting a real vision of John, but it actually comes out again in Revelation 21, where we don't need the light, but we need Jesus will be that light. And that's what that represents there. The incense of altar, or the altar, excuse me, did a little dyslexic there. Altar of incense is the prayer, are the prayers of his people. So, and this actually comes out again in Revelation 8. Now, one of the problems with verses and chapters is they don't line really perfectly well up. Remember, that's a later construct. It's just helpful for us. And Revelation 8 verse 1 is talking about the seventh seal. But verse 2 through 6 is the preparation of the trumpets, of the angels doing the trumpets. And then verse 7 of chapter 8 in Revelation, we start having the first trumpet, and then go second, third, fourth, on and on, right? And yet, one of the things that you're going to see when you read through Revelation 8 in the beginning of it, while verse 1 almost fits in the back, in the last chapter of chapter 7, that's where we could put it from a timestamp standpoint. God had a reason for doing this. I still don't know what that is this day. Don't worry about that kind of stuff, right? But when you read from verse 2 through 6, it's talking about the incense, the prayers that are coming up and asking for, can you get this thing fixed, in essence, right? And that's what comes up, and it comes from this concept right here. The next place, the top area, is the golden table, or the bread of his presence. See, when Jesus said, I don't have bread alone, God, no one lives on just bread, but I live upon the bread of the word. And so when the word is part of your presence every day, and there is a friend of mine named Dario, and Dario has this presence every single day. He is in the word way more than I am, and I'm in the word a lot. This guy feeds on the word probably 45 minutes a day at least. He goes longer than that, but that's the shortest amount of time frame he's going to be in the word. That's a lot, and that's that presence. But he desires it, and it's food for him in every way, shape, and form. Now, when we go into the Holy of Holies, we have the Ark of the Covenant, and inside of there is are several things, and I really don't want to spend the time getting through that. But basically, it's the glory of God and the destiny. This is Revelation 22. The destiny of you, your final preparation point, will be in the Holy of Holies, in that glory point, not just stuck behind a scrim kind of thing, but a destiny. And Jesus, when he dies on the cross, this thing is so thick. We're talking about, a several feet thick, that you would have to take two oxen on either side just to rip this thing. When Jesus dies on the cross, that thing rips from the top to the bottom. And it was as a powerful statement of going, I am letting the people in all the way into this realm, that they don't just need the priests. They are in the glory point of God, because I'm accomplishing all of this by the death of Jesus. And see, when you start seeing it that way, you're going to go, whoa. And you got to see it that way. You have to understand it. And that will get you to a new level with God. Now, some people just get lost in the Old Testament, and they don't bring their stuff forward into the New Testament concept. But there's even a farther. It's called the law of spirit that Romans 7 goes further into with that. Okay. So the abomination causing desolation in the Tribulation Temple, here's what we see. And I just had to get some picture that would be kind of close. I mean, in that way with that too. The abomination actually means filth, detestable idol worship, and is disgusting. That's what it does. Now, there are a few people that have tried to tackle this. The aforementioned Left Behind series does something with it. Now they have, the Antichrist riding in on a pig, and he cuts the pig up, and then there's another person that gets murdered on the spot with, I think he takes a 9mm out and pops him. And, so there's all this kind of thing. But and you can let your mind wander, but I don't want to do that. But every gross thing in the history of the world is what abomination means. Now, if you're awakened, you know about these things with the trafficking or the human trafficking and what kinds of things they're doing. And I'm telling you, that's going to be in there. Not just murder, but every horrible thing that you can come up with is that kind of concept. And I'm sorry to belabor this, but this is what Daniel 9:27 is saying. There's abomination that causes the desolation. It's to make an amazing amount of waste, or to make something just not livable, or not even visitable. Okay? It would be like that Holocaust museum, and let's say someone came and destroyed every piece in there. And not only that, they broke every window. And not only that, they ripped up every single written conversation about it. Any recordings. They broke the lighting system. They destroyed the carpets. And then they burned it on top of it. We're talking about that level of just what? But it's the abomination which causes it just to be desolate. And so they won't have anyone in it for that last 3.5 years. At the very end of the tribulation, in the last 5-10 days, we're going to see the Jews come back and prepare it as well as they can for, Jesus who shows up in the cloud, Rosh Hashanah. Okay. So again, that abomination of desolation is that worst circumstance you can come up with. And this is also where Satan shows he is God to the world. Again, we have that Ephesians 6:12 reference that he is of that. But when he's forced into a form of the Antichrist, the Antichrist, Revelation 13, talks about the Antichrist will have a wound in his head, and then he'll recover from this. So it's like a real interesting conversation, and that's a possibility that he has a death and then a resurrection of that body with Satan indwelling it with that too. Ooh, you think the Antichrist is bad. If you met that guy today, you might sense with your discernment that he's a pretty bad dude. If you met him with the first beast of Revelation 13, verse 1, that is another level of indwelling that takes it to a new level in that first half of the tribulation. It's not as peaceful as you think it is. It's way worse. And then we go into, now we don't just have the guy who was bad and the first beast who is even way worse. And now we get Satan in the middle of it. I mean, it goes to new levels with that too. Jews are driven out, and they will go to a place called Petra. Now, and this is a probable area. They will be there up until Jesus shows up in the clouds. This is a special place for them. But again, all of them will go there. They won't choose to. So 2/3 of the Jews that live on the planet, maybe they live in different areas, maybe they live in Russia, India, China, America, wherever at that time frame, they're not going to go, and they probably will be, or they will be killed with that. Okay. But this last remnant thing will be held at Petra, and then they go in and they clean up the temple with that too. Okay. During the Millennial Reign, again, we have the Feast of Tabernacles. Again, this is the staying in the tents, and they tell the stories of God and the abilities to the people. But I want you to see what Jeff Swanson and I were talking about in the Foretold book. The concept that he wanted to do, and I loved it at the beginning of this. And because what we were doing is we put it 300 years in the future after the tribulation. And the guy is one of the sheep who makes it all the way through the tribulation. And he goes at Feast of Tabernacles, and he goes there to tell the story. Why would he tell a story? Because he's one of the people that saw Satan upon the planet. And so he's telling that story with that. So in that Millennial Reign time frame, again, the Jews are the priests, and the world will come together. This is when I believe, again, the sheep and the remnant will learn, their kids will learn about what happened in the tribulation, and even before that time frame. No one in the Millennial Reign actually will have seen Satan. And I know that's like weird when you hear that, because you can't imagine it. There are two sources of your sin. It's your flesh that drives you into sin, and it's Satan. You can't just say it's Satan. I hear this all the time. They want to blame it on other things, but you don't realize you have sin nature in you all the time. And it's a fight. It's a war every day inside of you. I mean, I know when my sin nature comes out, but I also know when Satan is like tempting me, when I was like doing everything fine and tempting me, and that was a tempt, which is like to look toward that. But the people in the Millennial Reign will have this situation that Michael the Archangel shoves Satan in the abyss. And he's stuck in there for 1,000 years. Now, in that time frame, Jesus will rule with an iron rod. And what that means, when he's ruling with an iron rod, he goes, man, if I'm here and I got Satan taken care of, you're going to be much more responsible or much more accountable for having sin in your life. I mean, you're going to go, and most people will go, like, I don't get it. There's the God of the universe that you can go see and visit anytime you want to and have an audience with him, and you don't choose to do it. Like, you've got every answer out there, but there still is choice. Everyone has to have a choice. And it says that children will die at about 100 years old if they don't have Christ in them. And you go, wait a second, that's not a child to someone. From an apprentice standpoint of what they're moving into, yeah, they would be. Because their parents might be 300 years old or whatever. at that time frame. So again, I want you to think about this one. If Methuselah, who is one of the descendants of Noah, and he doesn't die until Noah is doing his things of the Noah's Ark, right? He's building the ark. Is Methuselah lives to 969 years. But today, people who might be make up an age, 40 years old right this moment. Let's say the tribulation doesn't start for 10 years. I'm just making up a number. So today is 2024, and let's say it's 2034. I'm making up a time. So that person's 50 years old. He lives through the whole tribulation, which makes him 57. And by the time Jesus comes back, he's already come back, he's 57 years old. He's going to live, and because he's going to be a believer from that beginning point, he's going to be 1,057. All of the people on the planet will have outgrown anyone that you can imagine. That's just fascinating. So that's what we see in there. And this isn't a super long one. I didn't want it to be a super long one because I wanted to give you some of the backgrounds in there. Now, I'm going to tell you just as a point of reference here. I'm just bringing it up here in my head. We're going to talk about the life and purpose in the Millennial Reign. I've given you some hints about it, but we're going to go farther into that one. So if you like what we're talking about here, you can go to drscottyoung.com and you can actually download called the Hope in the Last Day series. But within days of, this is what, March 5th. I had to look at the date. March 5th, within days, I have a new cool thing that's coming up here, and I'm going to give you a hint. Would you like to see it? Because some of you haven't seen it, okay? Let me show it to you because this is really kind of cool. I'm just bringing it up. I didn't even think I was going to do this, but I'm going to show you this. And again, we're not fully finished, but we have a tribulation timeline that will let you see all those kind of timeline points in there. And it's hard to see it because it's going to be difficult. I can't show it exactly to you because we've got to get it in the PDF form and do all this stuff. And Jeff Swanson and I did this, so I'd done some of this and we got the backgrounds with that. And we plan to have this available to buy as a physical poster, but you'll be able to download it on my website, and you'll be able to download it on the Plan Bible too, as soon as we're ready. So we're not there yet, but we're coming. Okay. So if you like some of this information, share it with your friends. This is supposed to be kind of going, wow, it'll help you with even your daily life right now. So thanks so much.